All right, Willard, thank you. I'm sure many people will remember the young lady who joins us now this morning. She is 11-year-old Samantha Smith. She made headlines last year when she went to the Soviet Union at the invitation of the late President Yuri Andropov. Now she's made another pilgrimage, this time to Washington, to interview Democratic presidential candidates for the Disney cable TV channel. Good morning, Samantha.
Morning.
Welcome back to Today.
Thank you.
We're going to talk domestic politics in a moment, but first I've got to ask you about the death of the man who actually made you famous when he returned your letter. Where were we when you heard about it, and how did you feel?
Well, I wasn't feeling too good. I was sick then, but a reporter called me up about 6 o'clock in the morning, and he told me that Yuri Andropov had died, and it was really a horrible shock, and I was really sad about that.
Let's move on to the Democratic candidates. You interviewed all but 2 of them, right?
Right.
Which 2?
Mondale and Hart.
What kinds of things did you want to know? The same kinds of things that other interviewers did?
Well, not exactly. My interviews were supposed to have things on their big issues, the major issues, but also ask them personal questions.
Like what?
Do you have any pets? What was the worst thing you ever did when you were a kid?
What was the best answer you got on that one?
Well, one I can remember is from Cranston. He said that he used to have stairs that go down one way and then go down another. And him and his older brother would throw golf balls down it.
Did you find they all had senses of humor? Good senses of humor?
Yeah, they all did.
Did you seek anybody's help in formulating the questions for the interview, or did you put it all together yourself?
Well, my producer, Jean O'Neill, she helped me with it, and she told me stories about the candidates that I was just about to interview and gave me information on them. And then I made up questions, and she helped me make questions. Okay,
let's check your work. All right, we'll take a look at one of the interviews to appear wherever the Disney Channel has a cable outlet. Watch this.
I wonder, why do they all want to be president? And what are they like as people? But the most important question is, what can they do for our country? How important do you think it is to set up a national daycare system?
We need a coast-to-coast daycare center system to give every child a head start. And then, of course, in public schools, we need a full-time professional teacher to give them a quality finish.
Being as objective as you can be, how do you think your interviews compare with some of the professional ones that you've watched? How are they different?
Oh, I don't know. Interviews like this, and when you're talking with candidates, let's say, you cover mostly politics, and I'm trying to get more interesting points and views from it, and so I'm asking them personal questions, questions that people want to know, but they never really think of. They never really think about it, but they realize after they do hear the question and the answer that they always wanted to hear what the answer was.
Having met them all, did you develop a favorite?
Yeah, I did.
Want to share it?
No.
You've learned that already. Real quick, you went to the Soviet Union on a mission of peace. You went to Japan for a children's symposium on science and technology. You've interviewed the Democratic candidates now. Are you going to continue to be kind of a public person?
I don't know. It depends on what happens next.
You've already covered a lot of ground for 11 years. Samantha, good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. Have a good weekend.
I will.
Coming up on 8:43 right now, look at Alfred Hitchcock is next, as seen by the actors who work for him. But first, these messages.
I have to say at the outset that how proud they must have made their parents, although for both of them, they did pay a considerable price for. They became more famous, I think, than they wanted to, or ever expected to become. And there was a lot of good experience about what happened to them, but like everything else in life, they certainly had to pay somewhat of a price, certainly a physical one in the case of the first young woman I'd like you to meet. Before we introduce her, let me thank WCSH-TV, Manchester, Maine, for permission in using the following piece of videotape and other tapes that you'll see in this program. They did a magnificent job of putting together the chronology of an event about which you all read so much recently. Here is just a little background on the person you're about to meet. Roll tape.
Until late April, Samantha lived the life of a normal 5th grader in Manchester, Maine. She did, however, have a hobby that led to some major changes in her life. She wrote letters to famous people, her latest to Soviet President Yuri Andropov. Samantha expressed her concerns about nuclear war and what she perceived as the Soviets' desire to conquer the world. In April, she received her reply directly from Andropov. He wrote that no one in his beautiful country wanted war, and he assured Samantha that the Soviet Union would not be the first country to use nuclear weapons. And then he issued an invitation to Samantha and her family to visit the USSR. That letter transformed Samantha into an instant celebrity. There were interviews to be given. A crew from Soviet television appeared in Manchester to bring word back to their country of this American schoolgirl who'd caught the attention of their leader. Then on July 7th, Samantha and her mother and father, Jane and Art Smith, left Augusta for the start of their journey. And along the way, they began to get an idea of the increasing media attention. In Boston, there were dozens of reporters as the family passed through Logan Airport. But it was at Montreal's Dorval Airport that the real crunch occurred. Canadian and American reporters and photographers eager to get a picture, some word from this young girl taking her message of peace to the Soviets. Samantha's arrival in Moscow was the start of her VIP treatment by the Soviet government. She was met by 3 high-ranking members of the Soviet Foreign Ministry who were to stay with her and her parents throughout their tour.
Let me share with you the letter. Can you imagine writing to the head of Russia and he answers you? Mr. Yuri Andropov, the Kremlin, Moscow, USSR. That's only common sense. Dear Mr. Andropov, my name is Samantha Smith. I am 10 years old. Congratulations on your new job. Very, very smart of you to include that. I have been worrying about Russia and the United States getting into a nuclear war. Are you going to vote to have a war or not? If you aren't, please tell me how you're going to help to not have a war. This question you do not have to answer, but I would like to know why you want to conquer the world, or at least our country. God made the world for us to live together in peace and not to fight. It's my pleasure to present Samantha Smith. Ms. Smith. I bet you don't like the press.
It's okay.
You have to tolerate them, right or wrong. They get crazy when they're on assignment like that. They're afraid they'll miss the story, and they bump into each other all the time. You lost 3 pounds?
Oh, I don't know how much I lost.
You must have been awfully tired, though.
Yeah.
But we'll see some of the tapes of your visit there. Everybody was very nice to you. Mm-hmm. And it had to be somewhat of a disappointment. First of all, I'm going over some old ground. You've answered these questions 1,000 times, so I'm sorry about that. I wish you had met Mr. Andropov.
Well, it doesn't really bother me that much because he's a busy man. He's the president of Russia.
Yeah.
I'm just a little American girl. I mean, he shouldn't just take time off and cancel 1,000 meetings just to see me. So it doesn't really bother me.
Right. Did you come back encouraged, Samantha, or was it, are we still where we were? Or did you have, obviously, one of the reasons you wrote this letter is you felt a little scared, I think, as you said. Are you less scared?
Yeah.
Really?
I don't think I'm scared anymore at all.
Tell me.
What do you mean?
Why?
Well, I went to Russia, and the Soviets and me and I got to know each other. And they're just really nice people to me, or at least the people I met.
The children were especially nice, too.
Mm-hmm.
We've asked you to appear on our program with another young woman who made her way into headlines recently. This is a bit more complicated, and I'll give her a chance to fill in the blanks. Ariella Gross is a presidential scholar. This is a considerable achievement for a high school senior. She, as I understand it, intends to go to Harvard. And on the occasion of a receipt of being notified that she was chosen a presidential scholar, she decided to write to the others who had been so chosen and ask them if they would be willing, on the occasion of their being presented this scholarship at the White House, to sign a petition which called for a nuclear arms freeze. Let me give you, this is 120, Ronnie. Let me just give you share with you a part of the petition that Ms. Gross encouraged her fellow honorees to sign. "We feel honored by your confidence that we shall play a part in shaping the future of this country," Ms. Gross said. "We cannot, however, accept," this is what she would wish the other scholars to sign, "this high honor without voicing our most profound fears for the future itself. We therefore call upon you to make every effort to halt the nuclear arms race that endangers the tomorrows in which we hope to fulfill our dreams of today." What followed the mailing of these requests to other scholars was a phone call to her parents from the White House. And it appeared that the White House was considerably interested in encouraging Ms. Gross not to proceed with this political action. Whereupon Ms. Gross notified the press that she had received this call, which I think her family perceived as a rather kind of subtle pressure to get off this idea, concerned as they were about the possibility of less than planned events at the award ceremony. On her arrival in Washington, Ms. Gross tells us she was taken in a limousine without really quite being sure where she was going to, as it developed, the White House, where she met Ronald Reagan in person. We'll ask her in a moment about that conversation, but first I want to share with you, as it developed, the petition was not presented at the award ceremony. Ms. Gross did have an opportunity to chat with the President about her concern about the spiraling nuclear arms verbal warfare that's going on in the world today between the superpowers. Here you'll see, in just a moment, Terrence Bell, the Education Department chief, presenting the award to Ms. Gross, and then she is responding, following that, to a reporter's question about her meeting with President Reagan. Roll tape.
I didn't hear anything I didn't know already about his policies, but it was a lot more terrifying to hear in person that he so firmly believes that building is the way to reduce. And I just expressed my fears that if we continue that way, that I won't have a future.
Some may wish we could unilaterally disarm because they imagine others would follow. But we tried that. It didn't work. You have a responsibility and a right to speak out about your concerns. Here, as well as back home, we have that right because we're Americans. But let us always remember, with that privilege goes a responsibility to be right.
I am pleased to present Ms. Ariella Gross. Did the White House call you or your parents?
The first time, well, they tried to get me at home, and they only got my mother at work. It wasn't exactly settled, though, the first time when they talked to my mother.
Tell me, if you can, just briefly reconstruct the conversation.
Basically...
Excuse me, but you had already sent the request,
yeah.
had you not?
Yeah.
There are 141
Yep.
presidential scholarships awarded.
Right.
Okay, of which you were one recipient. A wonderful honor. What parent wouldn't want? Okay. So the letters arrived then at the homes of the honorees, and obviously somebody said, wait a minute, what's this?
And called up the White House. And what he said to my mother, basically the executive director of this commission, was, do you know what your daughter is doing? And she said, of course I know what my daughter is doing. And then he went on to say, well, do you know that her scholarship could be revoked if she continued? Do you know that her name could be marred as a radical? The whole program could be canceled. My job is on the line. And he really, it was pretty strong pressure tactic.
Yeah. Okay, your mother hangs up and tells you about this. True?
Yep. Then I say...
Was your mother upset?
She was very, very upset. And so for a long night we talked about, okay, what are we going to do? And we decided that, you know, $1,000 isn't worth giving up a principle that strong. But on the other hand, if giving it up means that they just won their battle and they shut me up, then it's not worth it. So I wanted to find out whether that would be a worthwhile press story. whether it could get out, whether people could find out that the White House does things like that. And when that happened, the reporter called the White House. They immediately retracted, the Department of Education immediately retracted the statements they'd made and said.
But as a matter of fact, there was somewhat of an apology, was there not? Or at least there appeared to be, someone in Washington said maybe that other person shouldn't have done this because free speech is an honored tradition here. Okay. So what did you receive? Did you hear back at all from the others?
Yeah, before I got to Washington, I got almost half the people responded. It was a very short time to respond in, but they were very enthusiastic about it.
Who was?
The scholars who wrote back.
How many wrote back?
About 60, and about half of those said that they were really enthusiastic, they wanted to sign. Another quarter said that they needed to know more about the freeze, and then there were a few who didn't agree. But what happened when we got there was very different.
Tell me.
It was all the arguments that they'd used to me on the phone that I had to take with a really large grain of salt because I had to take them in the light of threats. These people had no choice but to accept. So when they said, you know, you're not here for your political views, this is just an educational thing, we don't want to hear your views, you know, please don't speak about them, they really thought, gee, the president will be insulted.
That is, the other scholarship winners.
The other scholarship winners.
So they were similarly concerned about disruption and,
right.
You know, here's this nice thing, let's not make a big deal. I get it. You understand that attitude?
Sure, I do, and that's why I was very careful to make it nothing that would be in the least bit disruptive. I didn't want to stand up and say, Mr. President, I got a letter for you. The way this ceremony was actually set up, when we got our medallions, you had about 2 minutes to stand around and talk to Secretary Bell. It would have been really simple to give him a letter, say, I hope this could get to the president, I'm very concerned about this, and it wouldn't have bothered anybody. But they were terrified of it.
All right, so this wasn't going to be any big showy demonstration as much as it is, Mr. Secretary, would you kindly give this to the president?
Right.
Okay. So, apparently you had a long meeting with the other scholarship winners, right? A sort of private, no press, right?
Right.
That must have been a real steam-bath meeting.
It sure was.
Well, just, can you briefly characterize the nature of it?
Yeah, I basically said, before the meeting, I had discussed with the advisor of the program, the chief advisor, what was the big deal? And it came down to, we don't want all the press. So I wrote to the press, I wrote a note for the press, I won't talk to anybody till after the ceremony. They said, we don't want all this conflict. I said, let me talk to the scholars. And they said, we don't want a disruption. I said, I'll just give it to the secretary. They said, fine. So there was no problem with the White House anymore. And I wanted to communicate that to the scholars, say, it's nothing to be afraid of. If you agree with the statement, please sign, or don't bother the people who do sign. And what came out was a lot of, you know, hey, we wanted the focus of this to be how great we are and how come it's been
You're going to ruin our ceremony.
moved. You're going to, well, no, it wasn't even the ceremony so much as you've already ruined it by having the press pay attention to you, you know. You're stealing our thunder kind of, and I felt really bad about that because I think that education is important and it is a good forum for it, but, you know, what can I do? It wasn't my fault. And so they said, well, you have a right to speak out about your concerns, but a legal right, but you don't have a moral right. Or you have a right, but only when it doesn't infringe upon our rights. And the only right they could come up with that it was infringing on was the right to the pursuit of happiness, which unfortunately isn't in the Bill of Rights.
Did anybody call you a publicity seeker, or whether...
Yeah, they said I just wanted the publicity. They said that was really their main
You must have been
concern.
rather depressed about
I was pretty upset.
You were.
I wanted to go home, really. I almost went home in the middle of it, but two things happened. A friend of mine showed up from home and gave me some pep talks, and then I went to the anti-MX rally on the Capitol with people like Congressman Markey and Randy Forsberg, and that was very inspiring.
Now, what happens? A limousine shows up. Incidentally, this is a week-long series of events in Washington. Okay. A limo shows up?
Well, our bus arrived at the south gate of the White House, and the limousine met me there, took me around to the west gate.
You alone?
Just me. And they wouldn't tell me where I was going. They said, don't worry, we won't tear that out of your hands. Just get in here.
You've got the petition with you, do
Yeah. Manila envelope.
you? What, is a couple of blue suits standing there waiting for you enough at the bus?
No, just one.
Just one, okay.
And they took me to see Craig Fuller, who's assistant to the president in charge of internal affairs.
Yeah.
And he said he just wanted to have a little chat with me, looked over the petition, said it was very nice, and wouldn't I like to give it to the president in person? And at first I thought, well, I said, you know, I really feel that the president is addressing me by having his representative give me the medallion. Whoever gives it to me, that's the forum in which he's addressing me. So I want to address him at that time. And Mr. Fuller was like, you're missing the chance of a lifetime. Come on, don't you want to meet the president? And I said, well, he really didn't. He said, well, come up this staircase. So they took me up, and there I was.
Tell me, where were you?
I guess it was the Oval Office. From everyone's description of it, I assume that's what it was. I didn't notice the fire. It fits everything except that I didn't notice a fireplace in the back. Jelly beans were there.
There were. So, okay, we're running along. You had to, what'd you do? You walk in, you shook hands, obviously.
Yeah.
Were you alone? Was it one-on-one? Was there anyone else in the room?
4 White House TV cameras, and
personnel at
and a
each?
Secret Service.
Was there a person at each camera?
Oh, yeah.